Okay, I'd like to call this special meeting of the Great Island Advisory Committee to order on Monday, September 30th at 7:03. First item is comments from me. And in my report today, I'd like to update you on a few important matters. First, as you know, an appeal was filed on September 26th regarding the tree warden's decision to remove trees along 23A. The town is working with counsel to address the appeal, and while this may cause some delay, our goal remains to open up access to this extraordinary property that the town acquired 16 months ago, all while being sensitive to the environment. So we will keep everybody informed as the process goes along.
Was it one appeal or two appeals?
It was one appeal. Additionally, we are announcing that the Polo match, originally scheduled for October 26th on Great Island, is being postponed to a mutually agreeable date next spring. After discussions with the Hamlet Polo team, we collectively decided that postponing will allow us to maximize the experience for both the participants and the public. So over the coming months, we look forward to increasing public access to Great Island and hosting events that bring our community together. Lastly, I'd like to share that Saturday's event was a great success. Thank you to all the committee members who participated by answering questions or conducting tours. You helped out in so many ways, and it's really appreciated. We had over 75 people attend the morning session and more than 135 at the afternoon session. We received a lot of valuable input shared with Reed Hildebrand, both in conversations and through written suggestions on the storyboards. So as of Friday, over 300 people have completed the survey, and which is online, which Reed Hildebrand has noted is a really terrific number, especially for the first week. So the survey is available until October 15th. The website is greatisland-ct-com. And I hope that you will take 10 minutes or so of your time and fill it out. Again, the survey closes on the 15th. So we are looking forward to hearing a complete analysis of the results from Reed Hildebrand at our next meeting, which will be rescheduled to 10/17 instead of 10/16. So it'll be Thursday instead of Wednesday in this room at 7 o'clock. And that will give Reed Hildebrand enough time to collect all the info and be able to give us a thorough update. They'll also be discussing the focus groups and providing direction for our next community engagement. The next community engagement, we will be doing kind of the same output. So as soon as we get a flyer, like what we sent out, I know almost all of you gave us at least one group to contact, so I'm going to ask that you reach out to those groups again and share the flyer. So, because we did get good participation from that. So that's it for my comments. Next up is public comment. Do we have anyone who would like to speak for 3 minutes or less?
Yeah, I'm actually doing it.
Okay. Bruce, you want to keep on?
Time? Yeah, hold on.
So, good evening. I want to say good evening for a change. Since the 1800s, the land today, what is it? Name.
and address, please.
Luz Bueno, 123 Hoyt Street. Luz Elena Bueno, to be precise. Since the 1800s, the land that today includes Great Island was owned by Helen Rivoire. In 1981, her defendants, the Sieglers, decided to create a subdivision. Some lots were created and houses were built. During that process, however, multiple easements and restrictions were already in place and more were added. I'm going to read a section of the deed. The declarant desires to place restrictions and covenants upon a certain portion of the land contained in such subdivision for the purpose of conserving and protecting the natural state of said land in perpetuity. Regarding any construction, another part reads, proper measures shall shall be taken to protect and preserve as many specimens of trees on the site as possible. I don't have time to read it all here, but I will say this. The restrictions are massive. Run with the land in perpetuity. And the intention is clear. Protect and preserve the land. If anybody here understands, this is very strong. 1981 may seem like a long time, but it is not. In terms of restrictive covenants, is in fact very short. Let me be clear. My husband and I are probably the second and third most knowledgeable people on this topic in the state of Connecticut. We reviewed hundreds of deeds with restrictive covenants in the past for litigation. We have never seen anything like this in the state, other than probably Central Park in New York City. You can do almost nothing to this land other than preserve it. I am asking you today to remove all equipment from Great Island, as it is prohibited to store any equipment there. Any equipment that must be used has to be stored overnight somewhere else. Even the temporary toilets could be considered construction equipment and should not be there. Toilets built on the property should be operating instead. Finally, I want to say that there are 3 access roads to Great Island. The one we purchased, the town purchased, and 2 others with easements. There is no need to cut trees to create access, and that could be easily proved in a court of law. Any decision that goes against the restrictive covenants could result in legal action against members of this committee.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
I want to first thank the committee for opening up this meeting to public comment. I appreciate you taking the time. My name is Natalie Tallis, and I live at 34 Baywater Drive in Darien. Tonight's about Great Island, but it could be about Weed Beach, Littlebrook Road, Norotan Heights, the Corbin District, Thorndale Circle, or even Nearwater. I worry Darien is not considering the cumulative impact of development decisions when we take down trees, remove shrubs and bushes, increase impervious surfaces, continue pesticide use, all while increasing demand on our infrastructure, schools, and environment. Over the past 2 decades, development has been the town's priority, and little attention has gone to conservation and the protection of our natural assets. As this committee moves ahead with plans for Great Island, for now Parcel 23A, I would like to ask you to coordinate your work with other town committees. Parks and Rec, on their development plans for Weed Beach, which has already resulted in the removal of about 60 trees and includes plans to remove another 40, as well as planting a lawn, putting down asphalt path, and using synthetic chemicals in the wetlands. Planning and zoning, as they consider a new development at Thorndale Circle. This plan includes the removal of another 50 trees and again an increase in the town's impervious surface area. The Department of Public Works, as they take down 7 trees along Nearwater Lane. I would like not to get another invitation to a parking lot party as I did from Darien Commons last weekend. We simply do not have a plan for the future of Darien that considers environmental protection and resiliency while our peer towns are fully engaged on these issues. Stamford held a climate summit last January to address climate change impacts. They have coastal resiliency plans, flood mitigation strategies. They're undertaking a citywide tree inventory and implementing a planting program. They're working with the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation to repair and protect the city from environmental changes. They've also just kicked off Stamford 2035. That plan starts, with data and analysis, and one of the main focus areas is sustainability and resilience. Norwalk has had a tree planting program in place for 18 years. They maintain a comprehensive tree inventory that is integrated with the city's geographic information system. The digital system allows the city to keep an update an updated record of their tree canopies growth over time. Darien keeps taking trees down. Norwalk's also working with Circa to study the impacts of extreme heat and climate change. Greenwich, among other initiatives, is in the process of a tree inventory. Fairfield, Westport, and Bridgeport all have sustainability and resiliency programs, while in Darien, every project includes irreparable environmental harm. We need to do better. Time already.
Does anyone else wish to make public comment?
Hi, Joseph Pontrello, 20 Whaling Road. I also speak for my wife, Anna. Actually, we'll start with my conclusion because in case I run out of time. I urge the town to heed certain wise comments from actually Select Person McNally only 17 months ago. Have patience to get acquainted with the island before we take irreversible steps. My words, such as cutting trees. Quoting again, Great Island is a pristine, and you'll hear this quote over and over again, pristine landscape with 1.5 miles of coastline on an environmentally sensitive cove on Long Island Sound. And quoting for one last time, prioritize, again, quoting Select Person McNally, prioritize conservation of this magnificent property, forever saving it from intensive development. And while perhaps at the time, Select Person McNally was speaking about private home builders, the same applies to the town's ambitions today. Great Island needs to be defended and preserved in all cases, no matter who, including the town government, is advocating for destroying it. So while I'm here individually, many others are directly, materially, and adversely impacted by the removal of these 15 to 20 trees, and moreover, by the simultaneous push for accelerated and intense development plan for Great Island. Many of the objections at the prior tree hearing focused on the fact that cutting the trees for widening of the road was at best premature, given that there is no approved and budgeted for master plan. In addition to the town's professed need for emergency vehicle access to Great Island is undercut by the constant entry to Great Island from Mings End Road by fire engines and other emergency vehicles. Moreover, those objections are in addition to the priceless ecological damage that will be wrought on the island and surrounding coastal areas. To quote Select Person McNally, again published on duckgoose.com when describing what an asset the island is, the asset is pristine with old growth trees. Now, I want to use my last couple seconds here to address something. I want to comment on the finances of the eventual redevelopment plan. It could be, in fact, highly adverse to the town's finances. We are already pulling funding from schools, from necessary repairs and improvements to existing parks such as weed beaches. How will we produce and fund a budget for a major greenfield redevelopment at Great Island? And if that is in doubt, producing a budget and paying for it, why start a piecemeal destruction of this pristine space? And thinking about widening the entrance, while I have my last couple seconds here, the town is advocating for building massive parking fields, facilities, infrastructures, roads, and all the other unforeseen costs that will go into a budget that no one is talking about, that no one has figured out how to spend, how to fund. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Nicole Rivard. I live at 25 Hoyt Street in Darien for the last 9 years, and I'm also the Government Relations Manager for Friends of Animals. We're an international animal advocacy group headquartered in Darien. So I was alarmed last week to read in the newspaper that some town officials believe that it's like some sort of consolation to salvage up to 8 of the trunks of the 22 trees they plan to kill and mill and use them as a feature on the property. Tell that to the butchered trees and all the insects, birds, and other wildlife who depend on them for food, shelter, and nesting. I think the town needs to think about non-human residents as well as human ones. A staggering 97% of land in Darien is occupied by residential, commercial, or institutional uses. So I think it matters what happens with the open space that remains. Not to mention, it's not really comforting to tout a replanting plan per se, because newly planted saplings can help, but with nowhere the same effectiveness as mature trees. So it takes at least 100 years for a broadleaf tree to reach maturity. And in 1 year, just an acre of mature trees absorbs carbon dioxide produced by a car driven 26,000 miles. In that same amount of time, a mature tree will absorb more than 48 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and release oxygen in exchange. I also just wanted to bring to your attention that I had friends who had horses at the equestrian facility on Great Island for many years. And they had seen huge horse trailers and ambulances come and go along with regular traffic along the entrance road. So I believe the town is acting a little too hastily when it comes to the entrance road expansion. There's other options. It also doesn't instill confidence that the master planning process for the island will take into consideration the bald eagles, wild turkeys, deer, and others who call Great Island home. I don't know if you're familiar with naturalist Margaret Rankel. She writes for the New York Times. She recently wrote a column that said we should be all laser focused on saving healthy trees. And as to my knowledge, these trees are healthy trees. You correct me if I'm wrong, but she writes, a tree is a tree, right? If one happens to be growing in a place where you don't want it to grow, just cut it down, plant another one in a more convenient spot. Wrong. As a species, we don't have 150 years to wait for a black walnut seedling to reach its full glorious height before we start protecting the black walnut trees still among us. I couldn't agree with Margaret more. Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to be giving comments from Juliet Kane. She can't be here today. She's at 81 Locust Hill Road, Darien. I would like to comment on the process that is currently playing out around the 15 trees proposed to be removed by the committee and the town as part of a plan to widen the access road at Great Island. Sadly, what we are witnessing is the town's desire to pursue this road widening plan not only without regard to environmental, ecological, and health consequences of removing so many large mature trees, but also without regard to the wishes of voters. There is a very clear process in the state statute that provides residents with legal recourse when a municipality wants to remove trees. The town adhered to that statute by posting the trees and holding a public hearing on September 12th, which was also the first opportunity for the public to comment on the planned removals. But developments since the public hearing show that the town was only paying lip service to the statute and that it never intended to change course. Everyone who spoke at the hearing opposed the removals. This was not objection for objection's sake. Residents offered cogent alternatives to accommodate both emergency access and a large number of anticipated visitors. At the Great Island workshop on the 21st, we heard that Reed Hillebrand, the Great Island consultant, had not been consulted on the road widening plan and that all ideas for the island were still on the table. This means that the road widening plans were being developed in a vacuum, uninformed by the island's intended use, which apparently include leaving it largely alone, and all uninformed by an environmental analysis of the loss of yet more of our town's natural resources. The tree warden rendered a decision to remove the trees regardless of the public's views. A promised second session turned into a written information on the town website and an offer to speak by phone with the first selectman. At the very least, this is a chill to the process. Now that a resident has filed an appeal against the decision, the town has doubled down and vowed to minimize the delay to its plans. But why? Why is it reassuring the public that minimizing delays when the public doesn't want the trees lost to make room for a wider road? And the town's view that this is a critical first step for the Great Island is undermined by its failure to work with its own consultant, as well as planned polo match, a film shoot, and hundreds of guests at the 21st workshop. The width of the current access road is preventing nothing. For a resident to launch an appeal against the decision is a bold step and testament to the strength of public feeling. It is particularly to be admired when it costs time, effort, and much money to do so. I am fully supportive of this action and hope that instead of using resources to fight the appeal, the town will take the opportunity to engage in transparent communication and dialogue with its electorate, and not just about these trees, but about the environment generally. And that was from Juliet Kane.
Hi, Delise Bolleton. I live at 150 Pear Tree Point Road. I want to start by saying I applaud everybody who's spoken, and I agree with their sentiments. I actually wanted to speak to something else. I've been staying on top of the information from the meetings and discussions and all the different ideas that are being thrown around of what can be done with Great Island. What I haven't heard anybody talk about is the impact on traffic in a residential neighborhood. And there have been other occasions when things have been going on in our neighborhood that make it very hard to get home or to leave my house. And I'm not talking about beach, because I bought a house knowing there was beach there. That's not an issue. But I think you have to take into account if down the road you decide to have some big events on Great Island, there's going to be traffic, and you need to have a plan for that. So I hope that you will include that in your future discussions. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Marks. I'm on the RTM, but I'm speaking tonight as Susan Marks, 39 Fairfield Avenue, a 35-year resident. I don't really have prepared remarks, but I'll do the best I can with some of the notes. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you all for serving, and I want to thank you all for opening this up to public comment. I think it's very important to hear from the public. I've watched a lot of your meetings. So many of the past speakers have talked about 150 years from now. I'm glad they brought up that, because I believe that the town bought Great Island for future generations. I believe that certainly not my generation will have all the advantages, but down the road, the future generations will have it. So I'm actually thrilled that you're going to widen the road and that we're going to have access. There's over 20,000 people in this town. I walk from my house to Great Island, but I'm very fortunate that I can walk over 4 miles. There's many people in this town that can't walk 4 miles. There's many people that can't walk 2 miles. So they need a way to be able to get onto the property, have some temporary parking until we figure out what to do with it. And by this committee doing that, that will allow all those people that can't walk like I can. So I applaud you for doing that. I actually can't wait to have the island totally opened, all the different areas to walk around. I'd love to be able to bring a picnic. I'd love to be able to bring my dog. I know there's different pros and cons about that. It's all about public safety. And I understand how municipal government works after serving on the Board of Selectmen. I was on the board when we purchased Highland Farms, and there were many people opposed to that. Well, guess what? It's a phenomenal piece of property. There's not a ton of parking. It's used by walkers. It's used by children learning to ride their bikes. So we did that with the future of the town in mind. So I think that that's what you've done here, and I just want to applaud you, and I just can't wait for the whole island to be opened up. I'm probably in the minority tonight, but that's okay. I don't mind being in the minority. I've done it before. So kudos to you, and I look forward to the day that my neighbor who can't walk can drive her car, park, and walk around the island and just enjoy the pristine. I've heard that word pristine tonight. It is a pristine piece of property. I'm thankful that we own it. I know municipal government has different classifications, let's just use that word, than if it was still a private island. So I thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from everyone else this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rolf Oben. I reside at 9 Archer Lane, Darien. Thank you for having this meeting with some public comment. I, too, agree with much of what has already been said about the nature of the wildlife and the unique location of the Great Island. And there are many important decisions that have to be made. I'm not here to pass judgment or make comment per se on putting in a road, but I will say that the Board of Selectmen, at the request of the Great Island Committee, came to the RTM and said, we want to hire a consultant to find out more from the town about what the desires and interests are of the townspeople for the Great Island. And we have engaged with a consultant who's chosen. They've been on their work now for, relatively speaking, a short amount of time, what, a month, maybe a month and a half, okay? And they still have a lot of work to do. There's good response to the survey, but there are more workshops that are scheduled, and all that information has to be put together. We have yet to draft and agree on a vision statement, and then, of course, following from that, there has to be, in my opinion, a mission statement, which follows on from the vision statement. Okay, this is our vision, but this is the mission on how we're going to get that done. And we're nowhere with any of that. Okay, so my opinion is you're putting the cart before the horse. You're moving on things, I don't know what the rush is, but you're doing it without having all the information that you're already paying a consultant to gather. Okay, so my opinion, relax, take a deep breath, have a drink, let the consultant do their work, hold their feet to the fire, get that put together, then go over all of that, then come together on what is the mission, then decide on how that impacts on roads, trees, wildlife, etc., although I do agree that the island should be kept as pristine as possible. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Russell. I'm an RTM member on the Park and Recreation Committee. However, I am speaking for myself tonight and have nothing to do with the committee. I too would like to... What's your address? Oh, 18 Fitch Avenue. Forgot where I lived. I too would like to thank you all for taking the time out to have us public hearing tonight, public comments tonight. I think it's important as we move forward with this project and to keep our constituents and our residents abreast of everything that's going on. Having said that, here we go. Darien is extremely fortunate to have many parks and open space areas for our residents. We have a park recreation open space plan written in 2018, and we will also have another master plan being written very soon, or worked on very soon. This plan, this is the old one, this plan states we have a huge senior population, as we all know how successful our senior center is. As I enjoy Pear Tree Beach almost every day of the year, and have since as a child, I see many residents that have had knee replacements, hip replacements, or shoulder replacements. Others have had back or neck operations. Some seniors come with their caregivers to walk with walkers and canes. Some come in wheelchairs. Some seniors come to sit and read and enjoy the view. They feel safe and secure as the parking lot is open and flat to walk on. Darien has approximately 270 acres, it's actually a little bit more, I forgot one place, of open space and parkland. This includes the 60 acres of Great Island. Of this amount of acreage, only 13 acres do not allow dogs all year. Diller and Pear Tree Beach. That is the reason people come to Pear Tree for rehab. No dogs running around most of the time. Weed Beach is 22 acres, and dogs are allowed off leash in designated area from November 1st to March 31st. If you do the math, That means dogs on leash have 235 acres of park and open space in town. However, dogs are to be leashed all the time, and they are not. Dogs run off leash in Woodland Park, Selleck's Woods, every single day. Dogs run off leash in our animal control officer discussed his frustration with people. Can I please continue? Could someone donate their time to me, please? Because this is important. Thank you. If you do the, however, dogs are to be leashed.
Did somebody give you their time?
Yes.
She can give her time.
No.
I don't think that's the format we have for public comment, I think.
It's not.
Well, normally we do that in public for public comment and other meetings.
Okay.
Well,
You can come back.
If you could submit your full comments in written form to us, we'll certainly read the entirety of it, but the public comment is 3 minutes.
Very disappointed. Under a public comment of this statute on this in this park and what's going on, I do think you should have allowed me to speak.
Does anyone else have any comments? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Public Works. Tony?
Hello, everyone. Tony Campanella, Public Works. I'll be quick. The pink house is now vacant, and we are going to start the asbestos removal on Wednesday. The orchards and some spot arsenic removal remediation is starting second week in October. So with the orchards, you're going to see a whole bunch of fill brought in. We're capping that with 12 inches of fill and soil. And the spot remediation around the stables and down near the boathouse will be some excavation and then putting some clean soil, filling soil back in with some seed. We want to get seed in the ground by no later than November 1st. We had a utility tracking company come out and track water and electric. There's no sewer out there and no natural gas. So if you see some blue flags, some red flags, some paint, that's what that is. And we did that in the areas where we're doing some the arsenic work. The grass causeway is like that tidal pond. It's a couple pipes that allow the water in and out. And we're going to be doing some work there because the pipes kind of get filled up with barnacles. So we're going to clean that out. It's our first time doing it. So next week or so, we're going to have some bandwidth down there. And the Polo field, if you've walked recently, we got a nice little rub infestation there. So we're going to be working on that, putting some new seed out, and getting that back into good shape. That's all I have. Any questions from me? All right.
Okay. Next item is discuss the improvements and actions needed to implement the Great Island rules and access requirements. So I want to thank everyone. The committee, we divvied up different parts of this project, and everybody participated in it. And it was a lot of work. I want to thank Jim for putting the document together. And I'll open it up to discussion.
This one.
Yes.
This one.
Well, I'm happy to kind of kick things off. You know, I sent you all, I think on Sunday, probably late last night, a draft of a revised set of rules and access requirements. Kind of started with the current set that had been adopted by the Board of Selectmen back in, I think, early February and so forth. And basically, based on a bunch of the discussions we all have had at past meetings, and I know we've all sort of taken walks of the property, and a couple of us together and so forth, I tried to culminate that together in one document. So really, there were 2 pages. There was one of kind of revised rules, right, trying to take into account how we might make this island be, more open to our residents so they could explore different areas and so forth, but also thinking about what areas we needed to at least temporarily limit access to. Things like a couple of the pastures that Tony talked about they're going to be doing work on. Some of the structures on the island, or probably the buildings themselves, I don't think are necessarily ready to be opened up to residents, and so that's what this set of rules here incorporates. And then I think, to Monica's point, she did divvy it up, a bunch of different things as relates to cost, security, safety, other types of things. And so the second page was meant to go through and identify if these, sets of revised rules were to be opened up, what would we, or I think, more importantly, staff have to do to enact these rules, whether it be fill in some woodchuck holes, whether it be cover up some oil tank pipes or other types of things like that. And so that's what the second, that second table was. And I think everyone had sent around had called me with, or we'd spoken about different input. I tried to incorporate that all into there, and I'm sure we've missed some things, and there'll be other things that if the Board of Selectmen, if we do recommend this to the Board of Selectmen, and then they vote on it at their next meeting, I'm sure staff will have some additional things that, because they know this island better than anyone right at this point.
Well, I'll kick off the particulars. So there are, some simple typos, but I would, the bridle path signage is done, so I would delete that. I think that allowing bikes to park at the entrance, I see the value in that, but I think that if we're going to do that and we are not allowing bikes on the property, that we are sort of allowing bikes on the property, so we should probably figure out how to reword that a little bit, and also make sure there's signage that says you have to park your bike here. Right, so we're very clear. And then I think also, I think signage is terrific, but I think by the pasture and by the orchard, where's Tony? I think maybe roping off is a better idea.
Yeah, we're going to be roping that off.
Yeah, and I think up by the pasture too. I think just 2 signs is,
Okay.
So those are my comments. Right now, we're just discussing the actions needed that the Great Island Advisory Committee thinks the Board of Selectmen should pursue. So,
Well, Monica, does it make sense, since I guess we're talking about what needs to get done to enact the rule, should we just like for the public, go through each rule, and we can talk about what might need to be done to enact that rule? How else
I
would
just wanted to summarize the rule changes,
Yeah.
because this document was recently prepared and not posted with the agenda, so for the public, just to
Yeah.
hear if this is what you want to
Okay.
change.
So maybe the number 1 on this document basically said Great Island's open from sunrise to sunset, and then it would only be accessed from the main entrance, what we call 23A, basically between the 2 stone pillars. And then it includes a specific reference to that access to the island is not, is prohibited from the water. So we don't want people accessing the island from the water or going into the water from the island. We only want people accessing the island at this point through 23A, through the main entrance. So that was the first point. The second one was that visitors are encouraged to check the signage at the entrance of Great Island when they enter the property and abide by all the listed rules and temporary access restrictions that might exist. I think that, that piece of it, I think we'd all discussed that there should be some consistent set of signage that we begin to develop around the property, and that the rules and so forth should be clearly marked when people enter the island.
okay, I would say required, not encouraged. But you know what, Jim, we're really jumping around, and we have an agenda, and it's a special meeting. So I'm going to suggest that we go back and we finish up the discussion on the actions that are needed. Does anyone else have any comments on those?
I had a question about your comment on the pasture, roping that off. When it's remediated, and these rules are in effect, how do we open that up? Is there anything we need to put into this document that says, when the remediation's complete, we can remove ropes and open up the areas?
I think the way that it's worded, that would automatically occur, because we're saying that unless something is roped off or signed off that says, you know, temporarily closed or something like that, that you wouldn't not be able.
You wouldn't need to change the rules?
No.
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
as soon as the roping came down that said temporarily closed or something, you would know that.
You wouldn't be going against any rule if
Understood.
the ropes were down. So, good point, but no, I think we're okay on that one. Any other comments on this?
Yeah, so one of the things that I had included in here was a suggestion to now temporarily allow dogs.
Okay, Jim, we're not on the rules.
No,
So
I know.
that's-
So just, what I'm saying is, in order to enact one of the rules, which would be to temporarily allow dogs through the end of April, we would need to include things like garbage cans, and I had suggested both recycling cans and regular cans, and that we would need to include some like the dog waste containers that we have at our other parks, like Pear Tree and Highland Farms, where you can kind of grab a dog bag and you can also dispose of it. So that's one thing that we would need to change, is we need to actually put those onto the island so that when residents bring their dogs on, they can properly dispose of the waste.
And I think just any expanded access will allow for picnicking or whatever else, bringing on food if we're opening that up, more need for waste cans.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I'd suggested here in terms of getting the cans, I think, you know, any of the stuff we put on, ideally, it's something that sort of fits in the environment, that looks maybe more natural, doesn't necessarily look industrial. So whether that be the garbage recycling cans, whether it be the pet bag dispensers.
I think it's also important to note, based on Kip, what you just said about picnicking, food, introduction of bringing food onto the island, things like that, that this draft says no fires or grills, because, you know, we don't have, it's not like Weed Beach or whatever, we don't have like we've talked about the road and everything, life safety, access that we can be sure of. We don't have a plan in place yet. I think we need to leave that for the master planning to say whether that's ever going to be a thing or not. But that's currently in the draft, and I just wanted to touch on that to say there's a reason why fires and grills are purposefully, by design, left out.
Where did we leave off on the conversation with Reed? And I had to leave the last meeting to get to the Parks and Rec Commission, but Reed, Hildebrand seemed to be suggesting certain zones that would be opened up as opposed to everything unless it was marked off. I thought part of that was to make sure we understand the ecology and the animal habitats and everything. For instance, there's some discussion, that we want people just on the bridle path and not necessarily going through the woods because it does damage the habitat. I watched back the meeting, and it sort of seemed like the meeting abruptly changed, and that was a point that was left open, whether we truly want to let people go anywhere and everywhere as opposed to key zones. So, for instance, we've heard testimony tonight about concern for animals and habitats, and do we really want to be thinking about that when we haven't gotten the feedback from Reed?
When we discussed it as part of the people reviewing the rules, we again said we think it's easier to not have those rules that say you can't go in quadrant such and such. It's that you can't go where the signs tell you that you can't go, or the roping, where it's clearly marked, this area is closed. If you go into a museum or other places, when there's something under repair or it's temporarily or permanently closed, signage usually tells you that that's the case.
It seemed like it was a little bit of the case in terms of the work that we need to do when we walked back there. It would be a little bit arbitrary if you said, well, you can go back behind the mansion, but you have to stop at that tree and you can't walk beyond that. So how would you actually describe, well, you can go behind the mansion, but you can't go on this side, you can't go on that side. So I think that's why we suggested these signs that generally demarcate areas that we want people to temporarily stay off of.
A lot of signs. There's gonna be a lot of signs then. The other thing that Jeff and I talked about, which kind of struck us both, was kind of the use of temporarily. To me, temporary is something that, you know, it's going to be back in a couple weeks or whatever, and could we just say, not open at this time, and then the signs are more flexible and can be moved. But to me, temporarily indicates either something was open or that something's about to be open, and again, some of those decisions haven't been made, so.
I mean, I was okay with the word temporary because it's actually what it is, and it's temporary and it's in place until such time that it's not, but it communicates to the public that these are areas where we've made a judgment at this time, but it's subject to review, hence temporary.
That was kind of the spirit of what we were thinking, is we're trying to, we're in the middle of a master planning process. We're on the honeymoon of acquiring this great property, and I think our intentions are all very good with what we want to do with it, but we don't want to, you know, as a committee, and I think as a, you know, we make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, but we don't want to be coming out with signs that say, keep out, do not enter, you know, like that's just so draconian in the approach that we don't know if something's going to be available. So I think to leave it open to sit, so it just doesn't say keep out is what we were kind of
Well, Jeff and I talked
thinking.
about that. We actually had a very long conversation about trying to use positive language wherever you can, so that you're not.
And that's the only thing, that was the only reason behind it.
You could say, you know,
temporarily.
not open to the public at this time or something, but to me, temporarily specifically implies more of a finite period, and I don't think we know. I mean, some of these, it could be years. So that was just a thought that Jeff and I had in the signage, but we definitely wanted, you know, a minimized sign clutter, but it sounds like it's going to get tricky without greater boundaries, because frankly, my experience in 9 years on Parks and Rec is people pretty much don't pay attention to signs. I mean, I've talked to people at parks about no dogs, no idling, whatever, and they're standing in front of the sign and they claim they don't know, so. So we have to post it.
In that
Maybe I've talked to
vein,
the police about it many times, we have to have things posted, but, so we're gonna have to balance out how many signs do we want to put up.
Well, I think
et cetera.
that, you know what, I think that you and Jeff did a great job, and I think that Tony will need input on what the signs should specifically say, what the design should be, and I know that the Public Works, that's not what they want to spend their time on, so I think your input there would be very good. I personally think that we should, some of these are to do now and some are to do later as far as signage goes. I don't see any benefit to waiting. I think if we're ready to address these specific areas, we should get all the signs done at one time, be a little bit more efficient with our time and our staff time. So if it's okay with you, I will ask if you and Jeff will continue to work with Tony.
Oh, yeah, no, we intend to.
Yeah, I mean, we could have temporary signs that say temporarily not restricted, and then think about with staff and everything about the permanent signage, right? I think you had mentioned creating maybe like the same kind of look that you would see at like a ski resort, where every sign sort of has a certain type of font and build and so forth, right?
But are you suggesting that we create one set of signs now and then we upgrade those to something in the future?
Probably.
Signs are expensive, so.
Like, we have some signs out there now where it's like literally like a 2x4 and with a sign out. So you could start with a temporary sign that's, I'm not suggesting we like spend double the money, but you could start up with a temporary sign so that we can open up the island on, you know, effective October 7th. And then as you design like the look and the feel and the color and the logos that you may want on other signs, you can do that.
Well, something Reed Hildebrand should
Yeah.
weigh in on.
that's what we were saying, is that we're in the master planning process. We don't want to wait another year to a year and a half till that whole process is put to bed and we've agreed on what that plan is, to increase access to the island. So at the same time, so we don't want to preempt the whole wayfinding portion of Reed Hildebrand's process. And you know, based on the best practices and the places that we all go, and you see how nice signs can be, I would guess that our permanent signage somewhere down the road will be quite attractive when we have all of our branding in place and our wayfinding plan together. But certainly for now, I think that to all those listening and in the room, I think, you know, who are watching this meeting back, we could say, if you don't like a sign that you see now that's allowing for access for the next, hopefully 18 months, then that's not going to be the final end-all be-all sign that will be on the property.
You know what I thought was a great example? Tony took and made these, like, rather than having like industrial-looking sawhorses, he made these like natural-looking ones, right? And they kind of fit nicely. So if I'm thinking about like that, like a very simple sort of post, and you could put a sign on it, and then as you know, you and Jeff and whoever's going to work on this, develop what the, you know, what the signs that'll look like for the next 20 years. You know, those can ultimately replace it. So in terms of other things, I think if I look through that whole list of things that could be like material and cost, you know, one was the suggestion that we have a bike rack, you know, somewhere near the entrance, so residents can be able to ride their bikes there and park a few bikes there rather than having them, and just have them be stored there securely.
I think an alternative might be across the street, just putting a bike rack. I don't know if that's can be approved by the town, but that way it's not on the property. Not a lot of room there, but there's that little space off to the side.
I think it's a lot more of an eyesore out on the main drag of Peartree Point Road and Long Neck and Rings End. It's like that right behind the gate on the left side there. If we were to put a few bike racks in, and then we could put a sign that says no bicycles beyond this point, you know, then it reduces cars, it increases access, and it kind of hides them a little bit.
Yeah, Kip, I don't know about as far as safety goes, parking there and walking across. I don't know, but we'll look into it. We'll look into both.
I like, Bruce, you're talking about when you walk through the gates, just tucking them right there on the left.
Yeah. And now
they're out of
that
the public eye.
I think now the road's not, the construction on the road is not going to happen for a little while. So there's plenty of room on the left side of that. Like when you go from the curb, or after you go through the gate, there's 15 feet maybe to the fence, 20 feet?
We'll look into
20
that.
feet?
Yeah. Okay.
And then if construction does start, no more bikes, or what do we think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be closed Monday to Friday. I think that
Yeah,
you'd have to take it away because
plus half the road would be ripped up.
they're going to have construction equipment there.
I mean, I think the thing is, it's a natural place for people to ride bikes too. So if people are going to ride bikes too and then walk around, let's just have a somewhat organized place for them to keep them. A few times I've been there and I've just seen bikes kind of leaned up against the pillar. Feels like this would just be.
And it's really nice, yeah. I mean, it seems like biking has made a resurgence. I mean, it's like when my kids went to Hinley, very, very few kids rode their bike to Hinley. And I happened to be driving by a few times as school let out recently, and there's a lot of kids riding their bikes to and from school these days.
Bike
which
racks
is
are full. They've got several
really
racks.
nice to see it around town.
I think one of the other things we put in here just in terms of costs were, you know, that there were certain places around there, whether it be behind the mansion, whether they be over by the boathouse or so forth, where we could probably take, you know, very minimal, but put a couple put maybe one bench in each of 4 or 5 different locations, and you could put a couple pair of Adirondack chairs in a few different locations, so in case somebody's walking around and they wanted to rest, you know, they could. But But that was, in terms of other things that are, have a more material expense, that was one of the.
I think the Adirondack chairs, I've spoken with a couple of people that are, that said they would donate. So I think the Adirondack chairs, we should talk to Reed first and see what, how we can work that going forward. We might be better off looking at volunteer donations for that than spending town money for that. And that's the kind of thing that we hired them for, so.
It's a good idea.
My name is Ted Marshall. I'm from Retail Brand. I'm representing Retail Brand here today. So certainly, I'm more than happy we can look into that. And I'd also note that I think an Adirondack chair is sort of a more movable object is an easier thing.
Hey Ted, will you come up here because the camera won't pick you up back there?
So I think it's also worth considering, an Adirondack chair and a bench and a bike rack are somewhat different in the sense that an Adirondack chair is completely movable. In the case of a bench or a bike rack, you would need to have a foundation or something to affix the bike rack to, or the bench to. So I think it is, there is a sort of difference in a spectrum in terms of how temporary those different elements are. And certainly, we're happy to work with the GIAC and look into that and explore those options further.
And I think part of the thinking was, long term, there's going to be a lot of planning around where we want the areas where people are going to congregate. But I think the idea was maybe just along the loop, that mile loop, you could just always put a couple at least temporary benches where people could just, if an elderly person was walking and just felt like they need to take a break for 10 minutes.
That was one of the big thoughts, was more that the Adirondack chair is kind of like a bucket seat, and
right.
Getting out of it for some people could be potentially difficult, and that having a bench where there's a handle and you're sitting more at a, your knees are bent at a 90-degree angle more, and that you're not having to get out from a bucket seat.
Right, so a more accessible seat.
Yeah, so if we could find some benches that are sturdy, that don't tip over too easily, just
The benches have to be concreted down? Can't they be a wide enough base and heavy enough that they don't tip over?
Well, I think benches at Weed Beach that aren't concreted down, they get moved around. They're very, very heavy.
Understood.
And they're about $1,000 each.
That's what we got told.
That's the Parks and Rec. That's the Parks and Rec cost.
I thought about it almost like if you guys are all been to like the DHS courtyard, how they have a bunch of chairs there and kind of people just move around when they want to sit and talk to each other. If you just had a few of those, that could.
Well, and the good thing about benches is that, as you point out, when you put them on the pathway, it allows for sort of a temporary respite, with the idea that the person who's making that loop isn't necessarily going to sit and lounge and read a paper on a bench for a half hour, but if is tired or sore, can sit for a few minutes and have a sip of water and get up and keep going. And there's certainly areas perhaps where the vistas are exceptionally beautiful to place Adirondack chairs where people can sit and read and contemplating. I mean, it's like two different purposes for those two different types of furniture.
So would it make sense for Reed Hildebrand to take a look into this and come back with some suggestions?
I think they would be well suited to look at the layout and geography and say, Mike's absolutely wrong. We don't want benches there. But typically, we have benches over in these areas, and Adirondack chairs might be more useful in these areas, certainly.
But I also think it's important for them to look at it, because in the long term, we don't want to be replacing these things in a year, right? Or taking them out, throwing them out. It'd be nice if they could stay on the final plan.
Understood, yeah, absolutely. It sounds as though we should look into both, potential placement locations and then also potential products that are cost effective but are also temporary and don't require a concrete footing.
And we definitely want to move forward on the governance issue, but this would also be something maybe James Lima could weigh in on as far as how we fund these.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll initiate that conversation and with the intent of sort of maybe funding a donation or something like that.
And we have a donation program through Parks and Rec for our existing cars.
Are we currently set up, if somebody did want to donate something, like they were listening, like, are they allowed to make a donation? Like, how do we accept it? Does the Board of Selectmen have to accept the?
Are you saying for Great Island or in general?
How do we accept any
What's
donations?
our number?
What's the threshold?
12,000.
12,000.
Can be accepted without RTM approval.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, for the parks, we have a set program, and we're actually in the process of updating it, and the price is just refreshing the language, but there's set selections people can pick for, because we want them to be uniform, certain quality, and then we up the price to allow for maintenance for 10 years, et cetera, but it's a set program, and the gift has to be accepted by the commission, which I think is under town code. But we don't want people just, kind of giving all different styles and whatever. We want them to look, to look uniform. So that's why we've netted it down to a few products, and certainly that we can get you the information on the ones that we're using at the parks, which might or might not be the right.
No, but yeah,
ones,
that would be a
you'd see.
terrific starting point. Thank you.
The ones we use, I said they're movable, but they're very heavy.
That'd be great, Lori. Yeah, please. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on the suggestions? Okay. All right, let's go on to rules and regulations. And
Number, that's what, 6?
Are we going to read them all, or are we just going to make comments on the ones we have comments on?
Yeah, I mean, how do we actually vote? Are we supposed to like read them all and then someone makes a motion to?
Well, this has been circulated to the whole committee, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has anyone not read it? Or I guess, I don't know when I would call
So,
anybody
you
out,
know
but
what?
has anybody read? Has everybody?
well, I think everybody's read it. I think everybody's pretty familiar. So why don't I ask for a motion, and then we'll go into discussion. Okay, so.
Well, I'll make a motion to propose that we pass the revised rules and access requirements, which are circulated around Sunday evening.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the Great Island Advisory recommendations to the Board of Selectmen to adopt the Great Island access rules as shown in Exhibit A. May I have a second?
Then we discuss.
Right, now we discuss.
Yeah,
Okay, Mike, you second?
yes.
Jim, you move?
Yeah.
Okay.
So should we read these for the public to be aware of, or? These weren't, sorry, I don't think these were listed on the agenda.
We should read them then.
Okay. So one is Great Island's open to the public from sunrise to sunset and may only be accessed from the drive that originates with the 2 stone pillars at the south side of the Rings End Bridge. Access to Great Island from the water is strictly prohibited at this time.
So we'll stop after each one, and see if anybody has comments on that. That one didn't change, right?
Tony, is
No.
the island on the south side of the bridge? Yes.
No, the current, it is different than the current one, which just limits the pedestrian to the road. So, I mean, it is a change from the original, if that's what we're comparing to.
Any questions on 1? So 2 says visitors are encouraged to check the signage at the entrance of Great Island when entering the property and to abide by all listed rules and temporary access restrictions that may exist and be posted on the property.
I think it should say visitors are required.
They're required to check the signage?
Well, encouragement really isn't a rule, so.
So I thought the same when I read it, and then it says encourage, and then later on in the sentence it says, and to abide. So the question is, are you, if you haven't read them, it's like a lot of the laws, the rules or laws that we have in our everyday lives, right? If you say that you didn't know, does that mean that you are blissfully ignorant and the rule's not applicable to you? So, I mean, we could change it certainly to
I
say.
think I'm sorry to interrupt. I think the language that you're looking for is that something to the effect that visitors are expected or responsible for reading and obeying all signage, because when you say required, it
I like responsible.
It makes it a little bit more difficult to enforce. How can I know that you read
I
it?
like responsible.
So
Okay.
visitors are responsible for checking the signage at the entrance of Great Island when entering and must abide by?
Must, yeah.
Must abide by all listed rules and temporary access restrictions that may exist and be posted or be posted on the property.
Instead of saying must, say and shall is better statutory language. Instead of may, you're saying shall abide.
Or you could just make it all responsible. You're responsible for reading them, and you're responsible for complying with them.
Visitors are encouraged to read and comply with.
We're responsible.
We have visitors are responsible for checking or
Checking with the rules and checking on the rules and complying with them.
follow.
I mean, I kind of like checking because it's such a new property and things are going to change. And so I think to encourage residents to check the rules, because there could be things that are seasonal, the committee could make changes to the rules. So encouraging people to check the rules. I mean, they're not written in stone.
Well, we're also going to pass these and send them to the Board of Selectmen, John, so ultimately, like, your board, if there's grammatical stuff that needs to be cleaned up, I mean, ultimately, your board is going to pass something, right?
Or not.
Or not.
Yeah.
But if we say and be posted to the property, does that imply that every one of these rules has to be posted? Because that's a lot of signage.
Well, as I said, may exist or be posted.
It says and be posted.
Oh, yeah, I switched it.
So we've switched it to or.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 3 said public access to Great Island is limited to pedestrians, bicycles, and motorized equipment, parenthetical, i.e. electric or gas-powered scooters, are not permitted. Parentheses, motorized wheelchairs for the handicapped are permitted. And then it said bicycles may be left at the entrance in designated areas.
So it should say wheelchairs, not add an S.
Should say what?
Wheelchairs, not wheelchair. Motorized
Plural.
wheelchairs.
Should it be bicycles must be left at the, instead of maybe, like you're giving them an option?
Yeah, I like that.
Must.
Yeah.
That's good, yeah.
I don't know if we need to add strollers in there.
Strollers are, we would allow strollers, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was
So
gonna
the
say-
the effect of having the wheelchairs say that wheelchairs are permitted, if we're going to specify that.
Oh, that's good. So in the parentheses, motorized wheelchair and stroller for handicapped and strollers for,
You talking motorized
Yeah.
stroller?
I think the motorized wheelchair was a carve-out because we said no motorized equipment.
Got it.
maybe you just add another sentence that says strollers are permitted.
Why would anybody think they weren't?
Yeah. Nobody's ever asked about that.
This
I
is a,
think.
this is a paragraph
Yeah.
about motorized stuff, not about wheels.
Okay.
Understood, it just limits to pedestrians in the first sentence.
Right.
We did decide in the past how to pray with those little kids' scooters. You know, the ones which, again, if you're taking.
Those three-wheel things or some
Or
of
the
them
little
too.
twos.
Yeah.
Just saying, if you're taking a
Yeah,
5-year-old
got that.
for a long walk, they're really handy.
So you're saying we should allow them or not allow them?
If we want to make accessible for grandparents who might like to take their 5-year-old granddaughter for a walk on the property, yeah.
I mean, the only issue we run into there is just we've cut one little stretch of pavement that's beautifully paved, and then the rest of it is old and tired pavement that's okay for walking, but it's not like walking down Fifth Avenue.
No, I understand, but we're effectively really limiting families with smaller children.
I know, but those wheels
to walk the
are
property.
that big.
No, I understand, but just understand what we're doing. We're limiting families with small children. We're not going to be able to drive on for the foreseeable future. You can't take small children for a walk. It's just too long a walk. It just is. So just as long as everybody understands that.
We're saying people can't bring children?
No, not children. The little.
You can't go up 23A and around the loop and all with a 5-year-old. It's just too far for them to walk.
Well, I don't understand what we're talking about.
She's talking about those little scooters that are
Electric.
non-battery powered.
Not even electric.
The razors?
Some of them, like a Razor is two-wheeled,
Right.
and then they also make them with the two wheels in the front and the one in the back. They're very popular with young children. They're great, particularly on like a concrete surface. On our surfaces, I'd be a little concerned about them hitting a little indent and flying forward and potentially getting hurt, but
I mean, that's why we don't have bikes, because the
I
roads
understand,
are-
but just
the
so we
roads are
understand,
not-
without that,
Right.
it's.
Why don't we say bicycles, scooters, and motorized equipment are not permitted?
We're just, so we understand, we're really eliminating people with young children.
You're saying a young child can't make the whole loop unless they have a
It's too
scooter?
far for them to walk.
And I don't
No, I'm
disagree with what
that they
Lori's
can't
saying.
walk.
I think it's true.
It's
I think
too
if
far.
you've got a
you now
young
wanna-
kid.
If you want to now go and go sit on the Great Lawn and have a picnic with your kids, it's just too far.
Well, forget the fact that you have to walk from Pear Tree Point to get there in the first place.
It's
so
just too far to walk. I just.
And I think if you
saying.
want to do that, to make an allowance for that kind of vehicle, which seems perfectly reasonable, then, you would have to put in language saying that, the 5-year-olds or less, cannot ride those scooters unattended, right? And keep the age limit to 5 or 6, so you don't have, the middle schoolers who are practically Olympic athletes with some of those devices going and flying around. I mean, maybe that would be a way to accommodate the younger people, to Lori's point.
So are we suggesting making scooters allowed or keeping them restricted?
If you want to allow them to children 7 and under,
Non-motorized.
non-motorized, and that they have to be attended by a parent when in use. So it's not like mom and dad are like walking and like, okay, go on your scooter and, be out of sight. I mean, I know it's, yeah, I know it's, well, I mean, if we look at enforceability of any of these things, we might as well just not go forward at the time, because I think enforceability is something that we're going to be working on as we go along with a lot of these, things.
Here, let's compromise. There are portions of the roads out there that are really, they're not safe for a bike, and frankly, and they're not safe for a kid on a scooter either. So let's come back to this point a little bit later when we are able to do a little bit more on the potholes and things like that. Okay?
So Monica, then I would say bicycles, scooters, and motorized equipment are not permitted.
Correct.
Okay. The next one says vehicular access to Great Islands limited to, I'll shorten it up here, but town employees, officials, agents, contractors, and other parties expressly authorized by the first selectman, tenants that are currently living on there, and their guests.
Guests should be plural.
Right.
Or guest,
Right.
apostrophe, parenthesis S, or, however you
And
want to do that.
the 3 fire departments, police department, and EMS, and other emergency services. So we're basically saying only town officials or people doing work on the island or emergency services can bring a vehicle on.
Since you were so specific, do you want to add Stanford EMS, since they're a big part of our response?
Well, it says, and other emergency services.
I know. You're just so specific about all the rest.
Well, because they were in the prior rules, so we could cut that all out and just say emergency services.
If you go to town officials, we got tons of RTM committee members, all kinds of people. Do you want to permit all of those people to bring cars? Or are we just talking about town, I would say town employees. And
It says designated officials.
Right.
Okay, and so that list is
Who's
all
designated?
officials, who's designated. I just think you ought to be more clear about that.
Should we get rid of?
I would just say town employees, contractors, anybody the first selectman authorizes.
I'll get rid of officials. And then there's, John, you have the catch-all, it says other parties expressly authorized by the first selectman. So then 5 says visitors are temporarily permitted to bring their dogs in Great Island from October 7th, presumably when you guys would pass it, through April 30th, 2024, subject to 1, the dogs remaining on leash and under the visitor's complete control, and then 2, dogs being currently registered with the Darien Town Clerk, and 3, visitors picking up and properly disposing of any waste.
No, I personally don't support opening the property to dogs at this time. I think we should get the people on. I think we should let Reed Hildebrand do their environmental analysis. Again, we heard the public, again, we hear about the concern about the trees and the wildlife. You could certainly go online and find a plethora of articles of the impacts of the animals. I think we should do that study. So I personally don't support that, and just my experience, again, with Parks and Rec for 10 years is if we allow the dogs on leash, the dogs will be off leash. That's a fact. If this does get approved, I don't really understand the part about them being Darien registered dogs. Again, I don't think that's enforceable, and we haven't restricted who can go on the property. It's open to anybody. So I don't know why we would limit it to Darien dogs.
Well, we're just saying only dogs. The same reason we only allow Darien residents to buy beach passes, and we only allow Darien residents who are not past due on their taxes to buy.
Anybody can buy a pass and go to Weed Beach.
What?
Anybody can buy a pass and go to Weed Beach.
And
The price is
anyone-
different, but anybody can go.
But we're saying only residents who have registered dogs can bring them to Great Island. So do you want any dogs?
You can open it to dogs, and you're opening it to dogs. At first, you're never going to be able to enforce that. I mean, do people walk around with their dog licenses? I don't know. And then, I certainly know people who in town who take care of their kids, live in New York City or whatever, and they leave their dogs with them when they go on vacation. So you're going to say, okay, well, you can walk your dog, but it's not enforceable. But
So do you want to remove the fact that they need to be registered with the town clerk, or do you want to cut the whole thing?
personally, I want to cut the whole thing. But if it gets approved, I don't see the point of trying to limit it to. I mean, I assume people go to Rowayton to walk their dogs. People go to Waveney to walk their dogs. So we not going to tell other communities that they can't bring their dogs. I don't know.
I'm not troubled by opening the island to dogs at this point. This is specified a finite period, so it would be subject to renewal. It would create a great opportunity to see how much of an issue is developing, if at all, without there being some sort of irreparable harm during this period. Frankly, we've, in the months, over a year that we've had the island, I find the reasons that I've heard thus far, frankly, unavailing. So I understand other folks aren't there yet. Maybe some folks won't ever be there, and I certainly understand those who want to hear more from Reed and Hildebrand but I'm ready to let the dogs on the island.
I would say I'm in the same boat as you, Mike. I think that the majority of the people do follow the rules. You're not going to have everybody following the rules. I think Lori brings up a good point that the Section 5, subsection II or 2, or however you want to say it, the dogs being currently registered, I think we could strike that. I think Lori made a very good point that, if someone's home from New York City, an adult child of a resident, and they have their dog, it's on a leash. So I think that, I support the dogs. I've been on that property for years. There used to be 20-something horses in that barn, and every rider of a horse had at least one, maybe two dogs following the horse, not on a leash, running through those woods. So this is not the first time that the island has seen dogs.
Are the selectmen going to be willing to reverse it if we find substantial non-compliance? Because
conversations. I've had people say, well, once you give it, you can't take it away.
Well, let's hear from everybody. Kip, do you have
And I
any-
think that's why it has an end date of April 30th. One, to do that evaluation, did it go to hell, and we got to reverse the decision. The other thing, that's the quietest time of the year, when there won't be as many people on the island, and that the people who want to walk their dogs in the winter, when there's 5 people instead of 55 people. I think it makes a difference for that purpose. So I kind of forced the end date on it, but and that's why.
Yeah, I mean, all of these are temporary, just like the rules that were passed back in February. I mean, right, I'm imagining there's going to be a lot of rules that change between now and 5 years from now.
There'll be lessons learned.
Yeah.
So I don't have a dog. I love dogs, but I try and represent the public on the committee, so I think I've heard from more people that they want dogs on the island, and I think it just gets those people access to, which I think is my main goal, and to get more people to see the island. I'd be curious to hear from Lori, because there are parks that we have where dogs are allowed. What is the decision-making process for allowing dogs or not? When do dogs not get allowed? And I understand enforcement is an issue, definitely, for being on leash, but they're still allowed at other parks. So I think I'd like to hear more about that, and then maybe we do something more for the enforcement, and what does that entail?
Yeah, I mean, there's long history. I mean, that we tried the Weed Beach program, winter only, for a couple of years. We did eventually make it permanent, although we still see a lot of people not complying with the rules. So it's been a frustration. And, but that's just in the winter, but there were a lot of people who were concerned about the health issues of dogs doing what they do in the sand. So that's certainly a concern, and that's why we don't allow them at Pear Tree at all, especially because that's a very, very small beach. They're not allowed at the Diller property. When we put the running path in there, which was supported by the Darien Athletic Foundation, that was one of their stipulations, is that they did not want dogs on the running path and through there at all. Cherry Lawn, we try to limit it to different areas. We ask for no animals on the athletic fields, but they're always all over the athletic fields. And also say in certain areas it's a real maintenance challenge for our staff, which needs to also be considered, because the messes are everywhere and the guys are constantly mowing through it and stepping in it, and it does create maintenance issues for our staff. So we just have to be aware of that. But I think if we're going to do this, we have to actually have enforcement.
Well, have you guys always had those dog waste disposal stands up there? Those are relatively new, aren't they?
I can't say always.
A year or two?
Yeah, I can't say always. We have a small budget for them, but we don't have enough budget to keep them full all the time, frankly. And honestly, I think if people are walking their dog, they should be bringing their own, personally. But
Well, if you add it to the budget, I'll vote to pass it.
Well, you know what, I reached out to Jeff, because Jeff and Mark weren't able to join us, and Jeff said, my main concern on the rules is permitting dog access now. I'm not necessarily against it going forward, but I would like to hear the public input we received on the topic at the workshops and gain a better understanding of the ecological ramifications, even of dogs on leashes. I do think that this will have some impact on the visitor experience, if nothing else, so we should consider it carefully. And also, while the rules prohibit disturbing the wildlife, they don't appear to limit where people can walk other than the gangway, pasture, and buildings. I'm not sure that this lines up with Reed Hildebrand's recommendations, and I would like to review those too. So he continues, I'm not sure what is lost by taking this up after our October meeting, when presumably Reed Hildebrand can answer these questions. Hope this is helpful. So I probably, I don't think I could have written this any better. I definitely feel this way. I agree with Jeff 100% that I don't think this is, I'm not looking at this as a dog yes or a dog no question. I'm really looking at this as part of the process. And we hired Reed Hildebrand. We spent $1,382,000 hiring them. And I think that we should wait and see what the results from the surveys and from the meeting on the 21st produce. There are people that definitely want dogs, right? And there are people that are concerned about the birds and about the animals, and they don't want dogs. And I feel like making a decision today on this is not giving a full voice to everybody out there. And I understand that this is a temporary situation, but as somebody that's been in town government, it is really, really hard to take something back. So I would suggest before we put ourselves in a situation where we are making a decision, the 9 of us, or the 7 of us tonight, on this without hearing both sides and without getting the benefit of Reed Hildebrand's input is premature, in my opinion.
Well, on this, the last thing I'll say is I've heard from hundreds of people who think it's crazy that they can't bring dogs on there, the same way that we can. Our Parks and Rec Commission lets them on virtually every other property. As it relates to kind of protecting the birds, we're requiring every dog to be on leash, so I think it's very hard for a dog to get to a bird if it's attached to if the leash is attached to him and attached to a human. And it is temporary. This is through April 30th, so this forces everyone to reevaluate it. The one thing I would suggest, I mean, Lori, you said that you have, you said that you guys have complaints. What I would like to do, because it feels like a lot of what we hear is anecdotal, I'd love to have a way whereas, you know, John, if the first selectman's office receives like a complaint about a dog, listen, whether it's at Great Island or somewhere else, I think it actually would be good to log it, and then we actually have a number, and then we can sort of understand whether it is widespread or if, at least in my view, I think 99% of the people obey by the rules, so it'd be good to try to track how many problems we really have.
Well, we know that people don't abide by the rules because we have cameras on Great Island and we see that people are, you know, walking where they're not supposed to and biking where they're not supposed to and accessing the property by boat, and the tenants complained about people's dogs being off leash. So what I'm just suggesting is let's compromise here, okay? We have a meeting with Reed Hildebrand. We are delaying the meeting by a day so that they will have an opportunity to collect all of the information and share it with us. And what is it that will give everybody it, and if Cheryl wants to come back next meeting and finish her conversation, I think that's great. I think letting both sides of this discussion be held before we make a decision on it is the
What information is Reed going to bring back?
The prudent thing to do.
What information is Reed bringing back?
I can speak to that.
Wait, hold on one second. Monica, what information is Reed
Well, I'm
bringing
going to
back?
let Reed Hildebrand talk.
No, I'm just asking what information you were referring to.
I'm referring to ecological impact and survey impact, but Ted is from Reed Hildebrand, so let's let him talk.
Okay. Yeah, Ted, if you could talk about what survey information related to dogs are we collecting?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the survey is one portion of it, and there have been through, you know, this is not a comprehensive review because the survey is still open and we have not done a quantitative analysis of it, but qualitatively, certainly there are a number of comments both for and against dogs for a number of reasons. The primary 4 reasons against, obviously, I think we know the reasons for dogs, people love dogs, but just anecdotally, the reasons that have been listed against allowing access to dogs in the survey, the sort of town respondents, fall into 4 categories. The first one is concern about ecology and ecologically sensitive areas and the impact that dogs can have on that. The second is a water quality issue because waste is a reality. The third is an accessibility issue, that there are people with mobility issues who feel that dogs will inevitably be off leash, and even when on leash can be somewhat cumbersome or get in their way and inhibit their ability as people with lesser mobility to access and enjoy the island to the same extent. And then finally, there are people who just say that they're afraid of dogs.
So you've collected surveys already and you've looked at the responses that are coming back now?
The surveys come in live, and so we have received over 300 responses, and anecdotally, I'm saying, I can also list, you know, there are certainly we have not gone and counted through and looked at the relative numbers. There are people who are very much for dogs, there are people who are very much against dogs. Those respondents who have said that they are very much against dogs so far generally fall into one of those 4 categories that I listed.
And the only thing in the survey that we said regarding dogs is just who you like to go to the public spaces with, alone, family, friends, coworkers, school trips, or with your dog?
There's a free comment period.
Yeah, exactly.
Free
There's
comment.
there's a free comment, and then I think that just, again, anecdotally, there are opportunities, not just the free comment, there are some opportunities, it's not just a check the box. There's more than one place to put in a bunch of comments.
So just to be clear,
that-
so you've been receiving actual comments in those sections saying that their concerns relate to ecology and concern for their physical safety? Okay, so that's fine. So with regard to the ecology, I think it would be very good use of time to actually address the factual potential problems, because we're in a coastal town and we've been letting the dogs on Weed Beach for years. I'm unaware of any problem or testing in the water around beach areas where we currently allow dogs having an
Right.
environmental
So
impact.
Mike, I can speak to that. We have an ecology sub-consultant on the team, that they're biohabitats. They completed an initial survey about 2 weeks ago. They're likely going to do another survey as part of their overall analysis, and that ecological survey, when it comes out, I think will speak to your questions. But it's like we are not the experts. We are not ecologists. I'm an amateur ecologist, but I'm not a trained ecologist. We have ecologists who are professionals on the team as sub-consultants who are currently doing the analysis that you're requesting.
And their analysis is, just to be clear, at dog waste that's not picked up in a bag, how that will damage Great Island?
And P. There's information online. You can go.
What is that study that they're doing?
It is not it is not limited to specifically that.
Okay.
It is an overall ecological analysis of the island as laid out in the contract, which is on the Town of Darien website.
Okay.
It's publicly available.
But what I've heard
So
Ted say
there's scope.
is enough. I've heard Ted say enough already to, which kind of is what I expected, is that there's going to be a lot for and there's going to be a lot against. This is going to be, like cutting down trees. This is going to be an emotional topic. Some people are, it's just, you're going to hear people on either side. So just going back to the ecology, having been in those woods a lot recently compared to 20 years ago when I was in those woods a lot, the ecology issue is, we've got so many deer on that island. Every single bit of greenery underneath the canopy of the trees is nubbed down. Like the pricker bushes, all that stuff is right down to there's hardly any greenery under the canopy of trees, and there's deer poop everywhere you go off the trees. So there's ticks, there's deer poop, there's turkey poop, there's fox poop, there's all sorts of poop in those woods. And like I said before, when we were running a stable, when the Ziegler-Steinkraus family was running a stable operation on that property for the last 100 years, there were boarders. So it wasn't just the family riding horses. There were 20-something horses on the property, and horses and dogs go hand in hand. And when they would walk the entire property, the dogs would be off leash. They would be in the woods pooping, and I can guarantee that none of it was ever picked up. Okay, so I think we have less poop on the property and today, and I think we're gonna go round and round on this ecology issue, and I do think that it is a nice opportunity from like a November 1 to an April 30th to try something like this when the crowds are gonna be so much lower than they are at a time like right now. So, I respectfully hear both sides of what are being said, but I think I'm still on the side of, I would try it, and I think we have a dog warden, and I think we need to instruct, so do we have an open rec for a dog warden? So when, we will have a dog warden hopefully soon, and then we should have some enforcement. And if we have problems at other properties that the town owns, we should have enforcement there too. Because I personally know people who have been bitten by dogs off leash, and it's not something that we should have. And a leash isn't that encumbering to the dog or the owner. There's those little buttons so the dog can run out 20 feet, and then you can pull them back in if someone's approaching you. So it's not like the dog is not able to go more than 2 feet from the owner while they're walking in the wide open. I think all we're asking people to be is responsible residents. And if people can't be responsible residents, then we.
And I think, listen, Parks and Rec allows a couple of places where the dogs are off leash. They can just run around. We're only suggesting this while they're on leash the entire time on the island. So I think a lot less chance, I think, somebody getting hurt when the dog's on a leash versus running around without one.
I still say a compromise is in order. We hired a firm. They will be coming to us in, 10 days with the results of the survey and with the results of the comments during the day and with the results of the, hopefully another 300 people that submit surveys. And we saw it with the tree situation. I think it's really, really important that we take a beat between when we talk about something and when we execute on that, if it is at all controversial, okay? Opening up the bridle trails, that was good for everybody, that was not controversial. But this is controversial. And I don't think that we can take it back once we give it. I don't think that that's actually practical. And I think making a decision without taking into account what the group that we hired to help us make these decisions on is not.
Well, we made our decisions around 23A without them. I think this one, listen, maybe we can just move on to 6, but I think it's consistent with everything else we do in town and other parks.
I just heard the public stand up and criticize us for trying to go ahead 23A, saying you didn't take the public feedback, people getting up tonight saying you hired the consultants, why aren't you waiting? We heard that person after person, and now our consultant's telling us we've had comments from people on both sides of this issue, and we're not even waiting for the survey to close to decide without all of us reading all of those comments. Trust me, I've read survey. Our townspeople take the time to write comments in these surveys, sometimes very lengthy.
I'd be
And we
supportive
should be
of,
reading.
as long as we're not talking about waiting until the master plan is completed. If you're just saying, let's read the surveys, the 300 that we've got, and let's let Reed Hildebrandt opine on a result, which I tend to believe that there's going to be. I already said that, so I won't repeat it. But I think in the issue, with respect to transparency, people listen back to these meetings, there's people here tonight. I think then let's do that. Let's say this committee is considering opening the Great Island to dogs sometime soon. And the winter is a good opportunity for that. And whether you're for it or whether you're against it.
We want to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. So GIAC@DarienCT.gov goes to all of us.
Absolutely.
And we, if.
We didn't hear from the public before we decided on a moment's notice to hold a polo match.
This is a different issue than that. That's a pop-up one-time event. I understand what's being said. I think as long as Monica's, agreeing that this isn't tabling this issue till like a year from now.
No.
That we can talk about it again in 3 weeks when
Absolutely.
the survey closes. And, because like Jim said, you go to a cocktail party or, anywhere around town with your friends and they hear us talking about trolleys and ferries, but they don't hear us talking about bringing dogs. So they're like, why are you guys talking about these far-fetched things, but you're not talking about what's right in front of you?
And you know what, Bruce? Our goal, I think, is to get more people onto the property, right?
Yes.
And there is a group out there that would walk the property if they could walk with their dogs. And that works for us. On the other hand, there are people that are not in favor of this. And for us to make a unilateral decision tonight without giving that group a chance to speak, or if they've spoken, not take the time to look into that material,
I just said I support that, as long as we agree that we'll come back to it in the near future.
I mean, the thing I would add is that if I decide to wait to speak or wait to hear more people speak on this issue, it is not because I didn't think we listened enough about the trees. It's a wholly different set of circumstances. Wait, we had extensive meetings and opportunities to be heard, and there was one person who spoke tonight about dogs, many people about trees, but this isn't about, oh, we didn't do the right thing about the trees, we better make sure we do the right things about the dogs. Two completely different, discrete issues.
I understand, I agree that we did our homework on the trees and the public had many opportunities. But yet, we heard both at the tree hearing and tonight that people still didn't feel they had enough opportunity. So my concern is when we're doing a survey, we know feedback to not even wait for that will reinforce the impression that we're not listening, which we all think we have been trying to listen, but the perception is that we're not, or that we're rushing.
I think we stick with what John said, which is we over-communicate,
You
right?
bet.
We over-communicate and we give people a chance. Once we start talking about something, we give them, we have a little pause in there and we give them a chance to come forward and share their thoughts.
I think we need to have some consistency here, because if you think about some decisions we make, again, like the pop-up pole event, no community input. Paving the road from the circle to the stables. There are a lot of things that we've done. Personally, I know you said you have 300 survey results that were comments on the dog. I've got an equal number of people that have come up to me and said, Jim, we paid $85 million for this island. We can try dogs. So that's why I'll be voting for this temporary access from October 7th through April 30th. So, has everyone said their piece on 5?
Yes.
Okay, so the next one is 6. It says all building structures and equipment are temporarily closed to the public. Visitors must remain 50 feet from tenant-occupied buildings per the signage. I think Tony mentioned, or Monica mentioned, we only have one tenant left?
Two.
Or one's moving out?
Dolphin in the greenhouse, as well as the gatehouse.
Okay.
No, we don't own the gatehouse.
Yeah, I know, but it's
So-
still occupied.
Okay.
People don't know that, to tell you the truth.
So all building structures and equipment are temporarily closed. Okay. And then 7, visitors are prohibited from disturbing and antagonizing or engaging with any of the wildlife animals on Great Island, including but not limited to coyotes, deer, eagles, foxes, and turkeys. And then on the care of property, those were pretty much pulled from the prior rules. And then for recreational activities,
Yeah, so Bruce, the number 1 here, I think that addresses the grilling thing that you were talking about.
no person shall light any unauthorized fire on the property.
I would say, I would go as far as to add including grills, but I just don't think we want to have an issue with fire down there right yet.
There is no lifeguard on duty, and swimming from the island is prohibited. Now, there's no shellfishing, hunting, or camping on the property.
You just pulled these from the other rules, right?
Yeah, there were some words added to a few of them, but
Yeah, it's not verbatim.
yeah. And says no commercial activities permitted on Great Island at this time without prior approval from the first selectman. This includes filming.
Correct, filming still or motion.
Wildlife, yeah. And again, that's commercial activity, so residents are certainly welcome to take pictures of the turkeys or.
I think the violations should be stricken. The fee needs to be set by the Board of Selectmen, and we need to identify who would enforce it
That
and
was
how.
copied from the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, but after speaking with Jen today, I suggest we
I
delete
thought some of
that.
these things, Monica, like if you look in the code, I think it's 10-34, they outline Schedule D attached to like the town ordinance, the town charter, that this language kind of came, I think, directly from that, where there's a whole schedule of these, of like different violations and.
There is a schedule of fines. Most of them don't refer to this kind of violations. They're more fire alarm violations, planning and zoning violations, blight. There's one that refers to the dog section, 10-52.
I think that's under the nuisance, right?
But there's really nothing like this, and where you just say a monetary fine between 25 to 250, you don't have a structure for what are the criteria for the severity and what fine accompanies that.
Yeah, we may need to think about this a little bit more to get this right. She's right about that.
Okay. Well, just check out that Schedule D. Okay. So those are the rules. I made some of the edits to different pieces here. Again, this was the first selectman, or the board of selectmen are the ones that are going to pass this. So feels like the only thing where there was discussion around was number 5 related to the temporarily permitting dogs till April 30th.
So Jim.
So these rules have been moved and seconded. So I guess if there's we've had discussion, are there any amendments to it?
Well, can I just make a couple of others? So if you go back to the top, I think take the F out before town. I think that the date should be left blank. I think that the Board of Selectmen will decide when the rules are adopted, and I think it should be requirements in the first sentence, not requirement.
Okay. Any other amendments to
So,
items 1 through 7?
how do we deal with 5? We had a lot of conversation about 5 with the dogs, and so there's a motion, it's seconded. Again, I'm sorry if I'm not as up to speed as some of you guys are on this process, but can we, with that motion on the table, can we modify this and take out 5 for tonight?
I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion to remove section 5.
In the same context as Bruce, what is the plan for revisiting that? We wait for the survey results, we have more discussion, and then we revisit it?
Well, I guess first there's a motion, so
I apologize.
someone needs to second it, and then we would have discussion on it.
I'll second it.
Okay.
So in discussion, so you're wondering about
Yeah.
when there would be reconsideration, assuming that
Correct.
the 5 is struck.
That's correct, yeah. So is there a timeline we'd like to put together for that? Is it, changing the rules several times now? Is that a concern?
And that's the second time we've changed the rules, so I think giving Reed a chance to take a look at all the information and giving, we'll have public comment at another meeting, and I don't like to make promises, but this is, a pretty, it's a decision that we should move forward on. So I think once we all feel that we have enough information, let's, I don't want to spend the next, 4 months discussing this, right? That doesn't do anybody any good, and it doesn't, I think we balance between letting our community come forth and share their thoughts, and we balance listening to our consultants, and we balance it's our job to make decisions. So the decision will be to recommend to the Board of Selectmen. But yes, moving forward.
And then if we're going to also strike the thing at the end with the violations, because it's not codified clearly enough at this point, I think if we're going to take some more time to make the decision on the dogs, that we should use that time wisely to figure out that violations.
Yeah.
Because I think that what people understand clearly is, people don't speed through on the Bruckner Expressway too much, or between exit 7A and the Throgs Neck Bridge, where it's 50 miles an hour, because there's always a cop sitting there, and you will get a ticket. And if people know that, they slow down. And if we are ticketing people because they have their dogs off the leash, and we told them that they couldn't have the dog off the leash, and they get a $250 fine, they're gonna tell their friends. And they're gonna say, they're serious about that law. I got a ticket, and I had to pay it. And then if we, that will drive behavior.
Well, John, can
Why don't you recommend, adopting an enforcement and fine structure to be refined by the Board of Selectmen with Town Council later? We'll take care of that. I agree. We'll fix that.
And so if we sent this forward to you, could your board and staff clean up that violation language?
Yep.
Okay. So if we sent it forward with the dogs, you guys could put whatever needed.
That would be great.
To be in there.
Well, we can modify whatever you send to us. The question is what do you want? What do you want the final form from this committee to come to the Board of Selectmen? That's what the motion and the second is to decide now.
So any other discussion on the amendment to move 5?
So is there any more discussion on the amendment?
So we're going to remove 5. Did we already remove violate? Is that already gone? Or did we already take that out, or we're going to do that in a
Well,
similar
we're voting
fashion?
to remove or keep 5 right now. We're
Right.
discussing that, and
Right, but
we
that's
momentarily
something,
will
that's
call
something the
for.
Board of
Okay,
Selectmen.
gotcha.
We
All
don't-
right,
yeah,
so
we
we're to
don't
finish
need-
5.
Yes.
So, I would amend, I'd make a motion to amend that, and I would say we take out 2 little I in the whole, which required us dogs to be registered with the town clerk. So I think I would make a motion to modify that motion to only remove 5, 2 little I, rather than removing all of 5.
Okay.
Is there a second to that, or?
Well, we have one motion that we need to vote on.
Yeah, and I made a motion to amend that motion.
That would be the third motion, right? So we had the first one about 5, and we have the second one from Lori to do something else.
No, Lori made one
Okay.
to amend the motion to remove item 5.
So Lori made a motion, right, to remove item 5. Somebody seconded that. We had discussion. I made a motion to modify Lori's motion to, rather than removing all of 5, to only remove 5, 2 little I, which required dogs to be registered with the Darien Town Clerk.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion? Why don't you strike all these motions? The first motion is whether it is to split the rules into the dog section and everything else, because the everything else is going to pass with the provision that you put the fine language in there to let us decide that later, and then have a separate vote on the dogs. Because that's the only part that's controversial, and then you can record that vote and go forward.
So that everyone needs to repeal all their motions. I mean,
it would simplify. I mean, it's up to
Yeah,
you. but-
we already have them on the table, so.
Okay, then
Yeah.
go.
Okay, does Jim have a second for his motion?
I'll second his motion to remove II from section 5. From rule.
my motion was to modify that motion to say, rather than removing all of item 5, only to remove 5, 2 little I.
So, but I'm concerned that the motions are inconsistent because we're it's not, you're not going to vote to pass the motion.
Right.
Because you want to vote, I think what you're trying to do is clean up number 5 to get rid of at least one part that some members may have had trouble with. So then we could then vote on the amended number 5, and John then might, or whoever suggested that maybe the motions be withdrawn and a new motion made, because really first, what should have happened maybe was to amend 5 to get rid of 2. Probably everybody would have voted for that, and then we'd be left with the question of, do we vote yes or no to number 5? I think that's what we're trying to do here. I don't want to tie a yes vote to the motion, to number 5 overall, with just removing number 2.
If there was a second to this motion and we removed 5 to I,
right,
then the only motion would be, and then someone would need to make a new motion.
Right.
So then,
or not,
We
or not
already
pass
have
motion 5.
We already have a motion an amendment on the floor right now.
Correct.
So we would need to address that.
So there was a motion made by Lori to remove 5.
Right.
So that was seconded. Then they had discussion. And then I made a motion to modify that motion to rather than remove
Okay, I'll
all
tell you
5,
what,
to
Lori,
only
you
modify
remove your
2.
motion, and then Jim, you can make your motion unassociated with Lori's motion.
Couldn't we do the same way, because either we'll remove 5 in entire, or we won't. I have no sense how it's gonna go, so if 5's removed, then we don't need the second motion. If 5 is kept, then we probably should have a motion on that specific piece. Then separately.
okay, it sounds to me like the consensus that seemed to be building around the table was that 5 was going to come out. And so if 5 comes out, then it can be rewritten by us or whoever puts it back in. Like the selectmen can put it in without us, but we can't put it in without the selectmen. So we can send something to the selectmen and say, hey, we think you should now allow dogs. So we have the opportunity to rewrite 5 in the next period of time that Monica's talking about that we're going to listen to read.
I mean,
So does it really matter what 5 says unless Jim's saying we're going to take 2 out and then he thinks it's going to pass, that we're not taking it out and we want to send it to the selectmen with it in.
Right.
Right? But
That's exactly it. So
Right.
I support allowing dogs temporarily on the island, so that's why I wanted to just remove 2 of I.
I think it's the same vote, because nobody is worried about that clause that you just want to amend.
Well, I thought somebody didn't want
I
that.
mean, that's not what's going to make or break
Okay.
Right.
paragraph 5.
So I'll retract my motion to amend Lori's motion.
Okay. Okay. So now we have a motion an amendment on the table to remove section 5 from Exhibit A. And Lori moved, I seconded. Is there any more discussion?
I would just like to say that, the reason I believe we're doing this is for everything that was said earlier, is to allow some more time for Reed to weigh in on what they're hearing from their survey respondents, and to be transparent, to allow the community to let us know what they feel about this, and that we will, as you said, revisit it at some point in the near future.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. All right, next item is
I think we need to vote on
I think
passing the rules.
Yeah, I think we still need to vote on passing.
okay. I'm sorry.
Amended
Okay.
version.
Yes. May I have a motion to approve the recommendation of the rules?
Well, I think we have that motion on the table to approve. That's how we started discussion. Lori made a motion to remove 5. We voted to
No,
remove 5.
okay,
And
yeah.
so now,
That's what I thought.
yeah,
That's why I
so-
was saying Jim's was the third motion, I thought. But
Okay, so
do we
now-
have to do anything with violations, like
No,
get those
no,
out?
no, we're good there. No, so now that the amendment has passed, let's vote on the amended motion. The amended motion to approve the Great Island Advisory Committee recommending to the Board of Selectmen to adopt the updated Great Island rules as amended in Exhibit A. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous, thank you. Okay, next item. Where are we here? Okay, item 7. Discuss and take action on expanding resident access. On this, I think this is pretty simple. I would like a motion that GIAC recommends the Board of Selectmen approval of a budget not to exceed $25,000 to fund access improvements and Exhibit B.
Funded from where?
Funded from, Jen, from the,
The majority of what was laid out in those to-do items would be funded from the Great Island Management Fund. And the source of that was the rental income over the last year and a half or so.
and we,
Some of the signs that are really related to being able to open up access can come from the original acquisition plan.
and the Board of Selectmen approved.
Both of those have existing appropriations, so there's not an appropriation to be approved, but
That's because we don't appropriate, like, we didn't appropriate money to do the paving, like, that's
No,
already appropriated.
it's already appropriated.
Right.
And this is safety related, it's fine for it to
Yeah.
be part of that, or expended out of those appropriated funds.
But it's just so that the boards have an idea of how much this is going to cost.
May I have a second? Mike seconds?
What's the motion again?
To recommend to the Board of Selectmen approval of a budget not to exceed $25,000 to fund access improvements in Exhibit B. And I got input from Jen on this, so. Who moved? I'm sorry.
You moved,
I
I think you
moved,
seconded.
Mike seconded. Any other discussion on this?
Where did it, how did we get to the 25,000?
Took a look at what else we've spent. Jen did a little
We looked at the
research.
cost of the signs that were originally put in, had a factor for garbage cans and, dog waste bags, all that sort of thing, and we think we're not going to exceed that for this.
So like if Jeff and I are working on signs, will we get like a sub-budget, or I think we all need to understand what numbers we're working within?
We'll give you a budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is to approve the, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm jumping way ahead. Discuss temporary parking. So we have Ted here from Reed Hildebrand, who's done a little bit of work on the temporary parking, and also Bruce and Dan and Mike. You've walked it, right? And Jim, you walked it. I walked it also with Dan and Tony and Ed.
So, yeah, Reed Hildebrand was asked to prepare some initial temporary parking options, and we've essentially prepared two potential options here. I've got 5 copies. The first option that you're looking at has up to 18 spaces, the second up to 30. That is, so this is the reason, essentially we're very limited in terms of where potential locations might be. And there was discussion about locating it around the area next to the greenhouse with the arsenic. That is an image of the root cellar that is currently adjacent to the greenhouse, which is shown in red on the map. And I wanted to include a photo image. This is from the environmental survey, confirming that is in fact still located there, and is likely not a structure that can be driven upon. So as a result, there's pretty limited opportunity in terms of where this temporary parking could be located. I think that the solution that we've come up with is a logical one. It would require no modification to the road. It would essentially be either pull off directly from the road, the existing road, or in the sort of larger option to have a 20-foot turn lane sort of within it. So parking on both sides with a 20-foot through access.
So this, okay, this is the greenhouse, this little white.
The little white, yeah, that's right.
The greenhouse. So basically, this is parking where the horse trailers would park across from the paddock near the stables.
That's right.
Both of them are. The question is whether you go one deep or two deep.
Depending on the number of parking spaces.
This doesn't look like it goes into the paddock, though. Are you taking down any, that fence, that split rail fence?
You're gonna have to, yeah.
No.
But this looks like it doesn't.
It depends on which option.
Look
I
at
think
the largest spot.
The larger one, I think,
The 30 spots.
I think you can relocate the paddock.
So these are the two that you're presenting?
These are the two that we're currently presenting based on the the direction that we received was to explore.
I thought it was the same.
Did you walk,
adjacent
Monica,
to-
What was like the direction? Like, what was the objective you were given? Like a certain number of spots, a certain location? Was it to be paved, not paved?
It was a certain location and it was adjacent to the greenhouse where, in order to combine it with the arsenic, basically co-located where there was arsenic contamination. And so the two areas that we know that there was arsenic contamination is around the greenhouse and then around the former orchard.
So you're saying we chose that area because that area had some arsenic on the
Well, you know,
ground?
I think if you look, Jim, when Reed did the possible vehicular models, they gave us 5 options, and 4 of them included this space. One of them included doing a kind of a loop, which Bruce was talking about. And Dan and Tony and Ed and I walked that, and it's not that that's not possible, but I think that looking at the two, this is it's not as onerous, it's not as expensive, it's not, you know, the safety profile is better. I think as far as our regulatory going before planning and zoning, I don't believe that this option here is would require anything. So it's just an idea. Obviously, we are in the early stages of looking at parking because we're going to be a little delayed on having the road. But I think it's, you know, we wanted to start talking about it, so I asked Reed to start thinking about it.
Okay. I see that. I don't know that I agree about the most safe. If I see this correctly, it requires two-way traffic, right?
Yeah.
On the road that's pretty narrow to begin with. That everything we've talked about so far about vehicles on the property with the road structure that is pre-existing is one-way vehicular traffic. So that this upends that. So I think, and I'm just a little surprised because I think the 4 of us walked it and we were talking about the loop where you come into the circle, you go up, there's a low area here, there's a pre-existing road that we don't have to build, and there's no cars backing out onto roads, because you can't ensure that cars aren't going to be backing out here as strollers and people are walking by. I would argue that this isn't as safe, and it's much more of an eyesore as you are introducing a parking lot within 2 of the iconic buildings on the property. I would call the stone buildings on the property, the greenhouse, the stables, the main house, to be the iconic. And maybe you could say the boathouse if you renovated all the add-ons that make it ugly. But 2 of our more iconic buildings have now a parking lot bisecting the visual, you know, the sight lines of them with this.
Well, I think that Bruce says this, we were thinking that this would be temporary. Possibly it would pencil out as something permanent, but as far as just getting some spots out there, that made a lot of sense. I don't know, Dan, you have any thoughts?
This thing looks like it's paved. We're not talking about paving this lot, right? I mean, what we were talking about on the other side was cutting the grass and letting people park like they do at events.
Certainly, the intent was not in any way to opine about
because
the
it
surfacing
looks like
of it.
black asphalt.
It's the location. The color is mostly just, you know, it was on a plan that is already fairly colorful, and we wanted to make sure that it was clear where the location was being.
I would say if it did go here, and to Bruce's point of having cars in 2 directions and people walking, we would need to redirect any pedestrian traffic to stop prior to that parking lot coming out of the estate house or whatever, that walk across to the other side, towards the boathouse, and then have people lead to the traffic circle in that direction, because you can't put strollers and cars in two directions and everything else on this road.
I think it's introducing two-way traffic on the main thoroughfare of the island. I just think I see why it's a central location and why someone would do that, but I think that, I don't think
I
it's
can
as
tell you, Bruce, that they
good.
were nervous, I guess Tony and Ed, about that road that goes around the greenhouse, that there's a steep edge off to the side.
Yeah.
And people, it's a steep hill, and if you don't have a four-wheel drive, and it's slippery in the morning due to dew, or it just rained the night before, that somebody's gonna go off the edge or something. So they were talking about putting guardrails and other stuff up on that edge, which is doable too.
You could
But
put
that
a few
was- That's what they were
wooden posts
concerned
in,
about.
but, yeah, I mean, we could put some, if we're gonna, I think our last conversation about that spot over by the boathouse, which is a natural graded, larger space for cars than this. And,
Can you point what you're talking about?
so where you come up, what we were talking about is you come up across the causeway here, and then around, and then here, this is the boathouse, this
Right.
little white building. But before you get to the boathouse, on your left side, there's like a natural opening. And it's been used for parking cars before, it's been used for a lot of different things, that space. And then there's a road, that's a dirt road, that cuts across back to the greenhouse. So the concept would be, say, do not enter sign, like a vehicular do not enter sign. And then this is a one-way entrance and then you pull off the roadway into a parking area that could, for right now, we were thinking even just mow it short. Like, not, gravel if necessary, as needed, but try it just as mowed. And then, I agree with what you're saying, Dan, and with Tony and Ed saying that road is definitely not a perfect road going across there. It is one way. I think we would put a sign on it that says not for pedestrian, just so the cars can use that by themselves. And then on that one area, as you're just about to get out there, Tony, maybe a few stakes or posts on the left side, wooden, so that somebody doesn't drive off the side.
So perhaps as we're beginning this, discussion, maybe we could ask Reed to, in light of like some of these comments, to re-examine or talk to us specifically about feasibility there, or really anywhere else that you might deem might be able to be fast-tracked for temporary parking. Because I understand how, the areas that you've just put here on a temporary basis might alleviate some safety concerns. But since we're starting to talk about it, I see the merit of these, and perhaps we can look at these others and others that you consider, so we can start to look at a panoply of options and start to weigh them.
Yeah.
There are other options too also. There's some spaces up by the stables that we could do some handicap at. Reed actually had another great idea. I don't know if it's practical, but we have empty residents, right? And they have driveways and they have parking areas. So maybe it's not a lot of spaces, but maybe it's for handicap. I mean, it's a little bit further into the island, but I think this is a good beginning discussion, and I think taking a look at the costs of all of these and how quickly we could implement them. So you have a lot of good feedback, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
One other comment I just have while it's on the tip of my tongue is that where the greenhouse is here on this map, if you just go out to the roadway there, maybe a little bit to the right is the peak of the hill. That's also pretty much the choke point of the road where it's the narrowest, because there's natural rock that the road is cut in between. So as you come down, like from the driveway where this other alternate lot that some of us had been talking about, where you'd come out the driveway of the greenhouse, you'd have a left turn only lane, you'd have a left turn only sign, but that's the portion that was just repaved. That portion of the roadway from the circle all the way into the speed bump is the widest of that roadway, because that roadway was redone maybe 20 years ago when those hardwood trees were put in, and it was widened. So I think you do keep, and then the other thing is by Monica, like parking at the pink house or things like that, the other thing that this alternate that we had talked about, some of us on the committee, is that this is a depression in the island. It's very low, so visibility is, so people that are using the island for what we want them to use it for, which is the pristine, the beauty, all that stuff, they're not seeing cars. Secondly, it's one-way traffic. Third, it's avoiding that pinch point. So I think there's a lot to be said. As you guys know, I've spoken about parking many times in previous meetings, so I'm happy we're having this discussion. I know we're not going to solve it tonight. I'd be very happy to be involved in talking with you, Ted, and others at Reed about this.
Does it make sense as a committee, just so that Reed isn't sort of spinning the wheels, just to give them some direction? Like, are we, as a committee, generally, are we looking for this temporary parking to be 10, to be 20, to be 30, just so that they know what they're looking at?
Well, I was just going to say, 15 is inadequate. I mean, just from what I saw Sunday morning, we'd have, we'd fill up those spots before 9 o'clock. So, I mean, 30 certainly looked more reasonable than, as a starting point anyway.
Right.
Then we'd have to look for other spots.
But I feel they are our experts. They've done this before. I can't estimate how many spaces we have. I don't have
Well, I think we
the
tell them as
background.
many as is practicable in their view.
Right.
And it might be, as I think, in one of the presentations that we had early on, it's like, oh, well, you might only really want to do 15 here, but you might be able to do 20 there, or you might be able to do some in another area. And I think the ultimate, goal is to make the island obviously as accessible for as many residents, while also preserving the natural state, which perhaps having discrete parking areas might help. But again, I think that's something well within their range of skills to kind of help us with.
But to that point, I don't think I would ever vote for cars going deeper into the island.
Well, and the one that we talked about brings cars not even this far into the island, because this both versions of this, whether it's the single wide or the double wide, is well past the peak of the hill and well within the sight line of, if you're down on the polo field, you're going to see cars as you look up towards the root cellar. If you're looking at this iconic view from the dock back up here, you're going to see cars in your sight line.
And
So-
even if we had cars parking at other dwellings, it's still, like Dan said, you're going to be moving them in.
You're bringing
so-
cars way into the
Yeah.
island, and if you keep them
Yeah.
with the original that we talked about coming in
Yeah.
here, there's no cars over the peak of the hill.
Got it.
Everything's back
Yep, okay,
and sunken.
yep. It's funny, because when we walked it, when Dan and I walked it, I had thought you were thinking come down this way, but you're coming this way. But okay, I think we've covered this pretty thoroughly for our first discussion. Any other thoughts on this for now?
I'm sorry I wasn't there Friday.
Oh, no,
I wish
it's
I
okay.
had been
It's
there
okay.
for that,
It's
but
okay.
I was out of town.
It's okay.
The only thing I was going to say is, is there, in terms of the more immediate, are there some spots located at or right next to the stables where we can maybe open up a handicap spot or two?
Yeah, we were looking at, that's a great idea, Jim. We were looking at right along the stables. Ed had penciled out, I think, 3 handicapped there.
Right.
Right, yeah, so definitely. there are possibilities there too, so. Okay. Moving on, next, may I have a motion to approve the special meeting minutes of September 9th? Mike moves.
I was at that meeting as well. I think I'm like off the template. somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna check on that, okay.
You can still vote on these.
Okay.
Okay, Mike moves, Dan seconds, and with the edit, including Kip, any other changes? All right, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. May I have a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes for September 18th? Same deal?
I was on that one.
Oh.
So, yeah.
No rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, Mike moves. Jim seconds, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn? Dan moves. Bruce seconds, all in favor? All right, thank you, everyone.